Okay, welcome and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Rivulous Irrigation Training Series, our first one of 2024. We took a little break here for the holidays, but we are back and I think stronger and better than ever, especially with our first subject and first guest this year. Now, today, what we're going to be talking about is this concept of hiring or really investing in your water management by use of a water manager. Now, this is an idea that's catching on in different parts of the country. We talk about, especially with maybe large commercial properties or homeowners associations, how much water, how much money can you actually save hiring somebody? And I think today we're gonna see some numbers in excess of $100,000 on several examples, right? I know some big ones back when I was working for Valley Crest. We had people that were getting 800, 900,000, even occasionally $1 million a year water bill. So if you can save on this, not only are you going to save some serious water, which everybody knows we need more of right now, and will into the future, but saving us a considerable amount of money by making another investment. And I love it when you can do that, right? You can be green, sustainable, and be doing what's right for the environment. So today, who are our guests? We've got a couple guests today, and first is Ralph Holt. Now, he's the president of Verde Irrigation. Now, they're mainly in the Arizona territory, predominantly in that, Maricopa County area, managing several properties there. But Ralph's been doing this now since 1996. He is one of 7 certified landscape water managers in the state of Arizona. He brings a ton of experience, but more importantly, a ton of success in doing this. Certainly, if I was HOA or commercial property in Arizona and I wanted some ideas of how to save water on my properties, Ralph would be my first call. So welcome, Ralph, to
Thank you.
this. We really appreciate that, and helping us too through this conversation is Mike Palumbo. Mike's the regional territory manager for ET Water, a company owned by Rivulous Irrigation now. Mike's been involved in water management, especially from the technology side, for over 10 years, 5 years now with ET Water and the Jane Unity software. Mike works with water managers like Ralph and also contractors in the Phoenix area, helping them really save water and money for their customers. Wanted to have Mike on board too, just to talk a little bit about how this relationship works, how you can create synergy through the manufacturers and the water managers. It's not a strenuous relationship. It is one of cooperation and synergy. And I think Ralph and Mike will really show you that today. And then Daniel Funes is going to be helping us out from the technology side. He's also at Verde Irrigation, and he's helped put together this presentation. And we'll be making some comments possibly during the presentation as well. So anyway, let's start with you, Ralph. Ralph, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So, Ralph, the one thing I'm really interested in is, you've been in irrigation since 1996. What was kind of that light bulb moment for you where you said, gee, these properties could really use some greater irrigation management?
Well, I grew up here in the Southwest in Phoenix. And so, when you grow up in a desert, you have a little bit different feeling for water than maybe somewhere else in the world. And over the years of contracting, it just seemed like people were wasting a lot of water that wasn't necessary to do. And so as things progressed, the technology was there, but the price points weren't right. The central control systems were available for golf courses, but no one would pay $20,000 for a sprinkler timer. And so it wasn't until about 10 years ago where the prices came down and the technology came into being to where we could really make things work, and save water and have a really good return on investment.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So when you started to raise this idea to so were you in the maintenance business or the landscape business first and moved to water management, or how did you do that?
Yeah, I started as a landscape contractor, and so contracted up through about 2016 is when we shifted gears to water management as our focus.
Yeah. And so what did your customers have to say about this? Was it hard to convince them to go this way? Did it make sense right away? I'm sure you had some of both, but in general, what was the perception?
Well, when we made the change, I thought the commercial properties were going to be the ones that were going to jump on board first, and to my surprise, it was HOAs. And I think it's because the HOA boards are looking for a solution. They're the ones feeling it in their pocketbook, and so they want to maintain their properties to be lush and beautiful, but they weren't sure how to do it. And so I would say probably about 90% of our new projects are HOAs.
Is that right? 90%. Well,
Yeah,
that's interesting, right? Because certainly for an HOA budget, landscaping has been my experience is usually the top, maybe security or landscaping, are usually the top two issues, and then the water bill, right, is part of that landscaping bill, and that's always at the top two.
right.
So it's neat that they recognize that, right? And they want to do something about it. So, what are some of the challenges, though, that you encountered in dealing with HOA boards and getting people over this hump?
Well, boards are challenging in general, but I think the biggest challenge as far as water management is concerned is people don't realize there are solutions out there so that they can save water and at the same time maintain the beautiful landscapes that they have. You don't have to back up the granite truck and rip all the turf out. You
Hmm.
just need to use your water efficiently. You know, the EPA estimates about 50% of the water used outdoors is wasted. So if we can, only waste 25%, that's a huge number. Um, and most properties are overwatering at least 25%.
Yeah, so what are some of the challenges that you've experienced, with your customers when you come on a property the first time? What are some of the things you look at? I mean, how do you go through this process to actually come up with, hey, well, these are the recommendations I would make. This is what you change, and if you do that, this is potentially the savings.
Right. Well, I think one of the challenges is most people think of irrigation as very low tech. Um, and so when you start introducing science and these high tech solutions, people usually need some time to process that and think about it a little bit. When we walk properties, we're looking for inefficiencies in the system. For example, if they don't have smart clocks, chances are the contract, at least here in the Phoenix market, generally calls for the contractor to change the clock 4 times per year, similar to this graphic. Uh, but what happens is in the summertime, the contractor will set the clock in May for the worst case scenario in Phoenix for the whole summer, and that clock will water at that worst case scenario for 3 or 4 months. So, step one, a smart controller allows you to, that clock will adjust on a daily basis based on the weather that's transpiring, as opposed to just a fixed number that has maybe no real meaning. Other things that we look for are the sprinkler heads. Um, are they using high efficiency sprinkler heads, high efficiency nozzles? Most people do not. Um, and so the more evenly you can distribute the water, the less runtime you need for your sprinklers. And so the more efficient you can make the system, the less runtime you have. Uh, Other things are, do you have check valves in your sprinkler heads if you have a slope in your turf areas? If you have high pressure or using pressure regulating sprinkler heads, that can be a huge savings just by making sure that the sprinkler head has the correct pressure. The spacing of the system, are the sprinkler heads spaced properly? If it's an older property and there's been some conversions that have taken place, have the heads been respaced, or did they just do a inexpensive conversion and so now the heads are not spaced properly? So those are all the things that we look at to see where we can, find savings.
Yeah, those are great points too. And I'm just wondering, and I do want to mention, I do have the Q&A in the chat open. So for our viewers, if you have some questions that you want me to ask Ralph, put them in there and I'll do that when appropriate. But one thing I wonder, most of those suggestions you made, I'm wondering, are they very, if I have to do any of these, make any of these changes or adjustments, is it expensive to do?
Well, it depends, and that's a horrible answer. It it de depends on how much water. Something that let me start over here. So, step one is we need to know how much water we should be using on a property. Most people don't realize that you can figure that out. Based on the square footage of the turf, based on the square footage of the plant material areas, you can come up with how many gallons are needed on that property in a year. So that's step one, is how much water should we be spending? Now we can create a return on investment based on how expensive these upgrades are. Smart controllers are relatively inexpensive as far as the bang for the buck. You're talking $2,000 to $5,000, depending on the manufacturer and the capabilities of the controller. If you're watering 48 stations, that's really not that expensive an upgrade. Sprinkler heads and nozzles, again, a lot of times the payback is within a year.
Hmm.
And so anytime you can get a return on investment within a year or two, I think it makes sense to think real hard about doing that.
So is there a way, Ralph, to figure out ahead of time what my payback's going to be or my return?
Generally speaking, yeah. So, what I normally do is we'll figure out how much water should be used on the property, compare that with the actual water bills over the last 3 years, and then we're able to say, okay, if you're using $200,000 worth of water, but you should only be using $150,000 worth of water, well, there's $50,000 that we have to play with, so to speak, and then we can compare that with how much it would cost for upgrading the system.
Oh, wow. So then this, what's on the screen right now is kind of an example of what you show your customers and
Yeah, this is one of the water usage reports. So we can enter in the historic water use for 3 or 4 years, and then this will spit out how much water you should be using. And so it's a real neat. Most of the municipalities, at least here in the Phoenix area, will do this for the customers as well.
Wow.
And so we always encourage the customers to start with the municipality and have them provide a report like this, because I think it has a little bit more value coming from the city than coming from the contractor, even though our numbers are going to be almost identical to the city's.
Right. Right. So I've got some really good technical questions I want to come back with, and we've got one from a viewer. But before we do that, I want to ask Mike Palumbo. Mike, you've had customers that you've introduced Ralph to. You've had this experience of seeing not just the promises but the results, right? What has that been like? How do the customers respond to this?
Yeah, they love having a kind of a third party point of view. Obviously, they rely on their contractors quite a bit for their opinion, but having someone like Ralph with the certified landscape water management certification, I believe one of 7 in Arizona, I think it gives them some good credibility and gives them a third party I guess to, I don't want to say keep the contractors in line, but at least to verify what they're saying to the boards.
Yeah, so that's interesting, right? Because so if I'm a contractor, do I get nervous when Ralph comes on my property, or how do I work with Ralph? What's the best way to do that?
Well, we have tried to structure EcoVerde in a way that we're not threatening to a landscape maintenance contractor. We do not do any maintenance ourselves. We do upgrades and we do repairs, but we don't do any of the maintenance, the weekly mowing and things like that. So we do that specifically to not be a threat to the maintenance contractors because we want them to work with us. We want to succeed together.
Yeah.
If we look good, they look good. If they look good, we look good. And so that's what we strive for.
Yeah, and that's really a great point, right? And if I'm a homeowner or a commercial property owner, boy, I would like to have a third party take a look, and especially one as experienced and talented as you, Ralph. But I'd love to have a third party come on and take a look, and then say, this is really what you should be focused on. I'd feel a lot better than that than if the company was going to derive a immediate profit from that was making the recommendation.
Right.
So
And a lot of times the maintenance contractors, their specialty is, the plant material, mowing, fertilizing, trimming. That is their sweet spot. Irrigation a lot of times is kind of the redheaded stepchild that gets taken care of because people complain, as opposed to, having the knowledge to know how to make it efficient.
yeah, and I certainly believe that irrigation is difficult and complicated. I also think plant species, fertilizer, soils, pretty tough too. So I have to remind myself sometime how much these contractors have to manage. And boy, they have to have a deep education. So Mike, you think, have you witnessed that synergy created between Ralph and the contractors?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I got some HOAs who meet with some property managers where they have contractors who either don't have the labor or don't have the skill set for irrigation. So yeah, we've put them in contact with each other. I think there's been a great a communication network and partnership with the contractor, the HOAs, property managers, and Ralph as well. So it's been a good partnership this far.
Yeah. Okay, great. So Ralph, one of the questions that's coming in is this, you mentioned daily adjustments for the controllers, the smart controllers. This viewer says, some of the smart controllers use real-time ET data and some use historical ET data to make their daily adjustments. Can you help us out kind of on what the difference is, and is there one better than the other?
Well, if we were talking 10 years ago, there might have been one that would have been better than the other. Really, all the manufacturers have stepped up and really do a good job in this aspect. For example, ET Water, they have the predictive analytics, which will look ahead to the forecast in the coming days. For example, here in Phoenix, the last 3 days we've had rain, so the ET Water clocks would have come Wednesday, Thursday, would have been looking and seeing rain coming in the forecast, and so they would have dialed the water back ahead of time and to save a little bit of extra water. And again, zip code weather has become much better because now those who use zip code, which is most of the manufacturers, are pulling off of multiple weather stations. Where again, 10 years ago, you're pulling off maybe one weather station that was at the airport. Well, now there's dozens, if not hundreds, and so most of those clocks are pulling off of multiple weather stations, and so you get a much better end product today than you would have years ago. If that answers the question.
That's a great point, right? Because 15 years ago, people were concerned, how close is that weather station you're getting your data from? And today, I mean, it's really amazing with satellite, Doppler radar, all the technology available. When they say it's going to start raining at 6 in the morning and it's going to be done at 8:30, it's amazing how accurate it actually is. There's
Right.
a lot more technology today. So that exists on the real time. How does that compare to like historical ET? I mean, I don't think they really know on January 24th if it's going to be cloudy in Phoenix or not, right?
Well, I think again, I think most of the manufacturers are doing a good job at merging those two pieces of information together. So the formulas are basing off of what's happening today, but it's also doing the basing off of what has been the norm for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
So that the clock doesn't have any large swings in run times one direction or the other based on one day's weather inputs. And so I think that's how the historical plays into those calculations is if generally speaking this is happening at this time of year, but today it's not, the calculations kind of soften things up to make sure, do we really need to add that much more water because this one day was an anomaly?
Yeah. Okay. Mike Palumbo, do you know your customers? Do they have a sense or feeling of the difference between real-time ET or historical, or they just know ET, or
Yeah,
they
a lot
don't
of
know ET maybe?
yeah, they know ET. Just trying to kind of educate everybody, kind of what the differences are and stuff. When we do see it, we believe our technology with the real-time ET is a little bit more accurate, but we feel that that's kind of one of the things that we do well. But yeah, just the education process, continue education for everybody, contractors, boards, everybody.
Yeah, right. We even added to our website a few months ago, real time. You can put in your address. It'll give you real time ET for your property that day on an hourly ET basis. So nice piece of technology that we're sharing. Try to bring some focus to this. But Ralph, the next thing one of our viewers wants to talk about is flow sensors. What do they do? How do they work into this whole water management process?
I think flow sensors or flow meters are one of the most overlooked option that should be added to an irrigation system. So the flow meter, the flow sensor is basically like a mini water meter that connects to the sprinkler timer. So the sprinkler timer can learn the average flow, the average use of water per zone, per valve on the system. So it knows, okay, zone 5 on average uses 60 gallons a minute. So we can program in, okay, anything over maybe 65 gallons a minute, there must be something wrong with the system, or anything lower than 50 gallons a minute. Again, something's not right hydraulically with the system. And so the controller will then, if it's a high flow, shut that zone down, assuming that there must be a broken sprinkler head, a broken pipe of some sort, and sends an email alert to us or to whoever it's programmed to alert, so that we can dispatch someone out to do repairs a lot of times before anyone even realizes there's a problem. And so these can be hugely valuable on large properties where you have hundreds of valves, and a leak could go undetected for days, weeks, even months, depending on where it's at. If you have a stuck valve, a valve that sticks open, even a valve that doesn't open, they can be just as detrimental. One, you're wasting a lot of water because the valve's not closing. Two, here in the Phoenix market, if you have a valve that does not open, you could lose tens of thousands of dollars worth of plant material because no one realized that valve wasn't functioning properly until everything started to die. And so it's a wonderful addition to a sprinkler system, because I can sit in my office and hydraulically see what is happening in the sprinkler system, as opposed to having to send someone out on site to do a visual inspection.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? I mean, so valuable. I learned this on a property in Phoenix many years ago when I was working for Valley Crest. We had already proposed controller A that didn't have flow sensing, but that proposal was 30,000. And then they said, well, we want you to propose one with flow sensing. That was 50,000. So almost double the price. And I thought, oh, yeah, thanks. But I made the presentation. Now, controller A didn't do flow sensing, controller B did. And as soon as I mentioned the flow sensing, the board was right on board. They said, we get vandalism issues in the summertime, a couple times a week, kids out in the irrigation at 11, 12 o'clock, or in early in the mornings, and they're messing with the sprinklers and they're breaking them, and we'll easily save the 20,000 on the water waste due to the problem. So yeah, flow sensors so valuable. I'm with you. I think more people should have them. So Mike, what percentage of your customers, Mike, would you say have flow sensing right now?
Yeah, I would say very little. I'd say maybe 15%. I think, like you guys both said, not enough. I think there hasn't been enough focus on that from our everybody kind of putting in the effort, which now some of the rebates are kind of going to be covering flow sensors, which I think is great. It's going to help promote that. People need to take more advantage of that, but yeah, very, very little, not enough.
Yeah, so help me out there, Mike. When you say rebates and flow sensors, what's a rebate, and for a controller, I think is what you're talking about, and then how's the flow sensor work with this?
Yeah, so the rebates kind of help pay for the cost of the equipment. Sometimes they'll cover labor, more times than not, though. But yeah, so you buy the equipment, put it installed, and you'll get a rebate back from the water district to help cover some of the cost. Doesn't cover 100%, but it's a pretty good chunk of change that it would cover to get everybody up and running on that. There's some stipulations on it. You just have to read the fine print, but there's some good opportunities out there.
Are they Ralph left us for a moment with a technical issue, but I see he's back. But we're just catching up on rebates and things like that, Ralph. But Mike, are these rebates hard to get? Are they hard to apply for? Do you have to go through a lot of process, or?
Fairly simple. You just have to know which water rebate company you're getting it from. Fill out maybe 1 or 2 page document with just some basic information, and then submit that. Once you get approval, you buy the equipment, install it, and then once you're done, you let them know everything's done, and in 6 to 8 weeks, you get a check to get your money back. So very, very simple process. We help people fill out the paperwork, kind of do it for them, makes it easy for everybody. But yeah, it's a simple process. It's free money out there. Might as well get it for everybody. And we're doing the right thing as far as conserving on water. Doing the right thing. Make sure we don't have any leaks and breaks once we add that flow sensor inside there.
Yeah. So what types of rebates are you seeing out there for smart controllers in the Arizona area, and how do they compare to some of the others?
Yeah, so out here in Arizona, it's mainly been residential rebates, $250 per controller, $100 per controller. We're starting to see cities like Scottsdale, cities of Chandler, start increasing that, where they're going to give, I believe it's up to 50%, up to $10,000 for Chandler, if you do a flow sensor and a smart controller, and then up to $20,000 per site for Scottsdale. So pretty substantial, difference from the last year or so on the rebate program. California, we're doing about $35 per active station for the San Diego, Orange County, LA areas. And then out in the desert, it's getting pretty, they've increased the rebates quite a bit as well. So they're doing, I believe it's 100% up to the first $2,500 for one agency, and then 75% up to the next $7,500. So pretty substantial rebates available, which is minimum out of pocket cost for HOAs, which is great.
Well, that's amazing, and that's about the best news I've heard in a long time. And I'll tell you why. We've seen a lot of pressure for people to do things like and given rebates to people for doing something like taking out their turf. But I've often said, it's not what you're watering, it's how you water it is more important. So to see incentives for properly irrigating smart controllers, man, when you think about it, the expense, not just the financial expense, but the expense from a sustainable standpoint to tear out a yard or a garden, replace it with something, and go through the waste of the new construction and all that brings in. That's a challenge. So something as simple as swapping out a controller, I think we should be supporting more, because you can make significant reductions in water, and this is some things that I know the agencies have been getting behind, but to hear that they're getting behind it even more, that really makes me happy.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's our job to kind of educate everybody, make sure everybody's on board, and help them understand the rebates. Like I said, it's easy to do. We just got to do it.
Yeah. So Ralph, we were just catching up on the rebates and things. And then one thing I know that everybody wonders, and this was a big challenge for me too, and I'm sure you get this challenge too. Gee, Ralph, you're going to cut back my water. So what's my landscape? So I'm going to save money, but my landscape's going to look terrible.
Right.
What do you say to your customers or potential customers when they have that challenge?
Well, the screen behind me is a before and after shot of our first property that we did back in like 2016. This is Saran Ranch out in Surprise, Arizona. And we were able to save them $125,000 the first year, just by watering what they needed to water as opposed to overwatering. We did no turf removal, no plant removal. The landscaping stayed the same. We did upgrade maybe like 15% of the sprinkler heads, but it was all smart clocks and a little bit of the irrigation upgrades. And you can't tell the difference other than there's no muddy areas anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful property, boy. We can see it. And to think that it's done with no waterways, that's great to hear. So what about, drought conditions when these happen? We see areas that go into water restrictions or reducing the amount of time. Ralph, how do you deal with all that? How do you make, for example, a smart controller or a whole water management philosophy work when you're in a drought?
Well, luckily here in the valley, we have not had any mandatory restrictions yet, and so that has made life a little bit easier. Almost all of the municipalities so far have been saying that in the foreseeable future, there will be no mandatory restrictions as long as you are using the amount of water you should or less.
Hmm.
And so that is the whole point of figuring out how much water you should be using on a property. That's the number the cities are going to use to decide whether you qualify for mandatory water reductions or not. And so they've all said so far that if you're using the amount of water you should for your property, they're going to go across the street and talk to your neighbors. They're not going to talk to you. And so that's what we're dealing with in this market.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that. And I always say, we're not in the business of selling smart controllers. We're in the business of saving water. And if you're not getting that done, then people aren't going to buy your product or your service in your case. So
Yep.
I think that's cool that you've got your eye on that ball. So you show somebody the potential savings. They come on board. They say, "Yeah, we're in." So now you've got this pressure to actually succeed, right? You're gonna have to show water savings.
Right.
Even if it gets hotter next year, they're still going to expect some savings, even though they might be using more water than they normally or not normally would. But it's not going to be a reduction necessarily. How do you step through this whole implementation process? What do you do so that one, you're successful, and two, your customers understand that you're managing water, but the amount of water you use changes based on the weather?
Right. Well, one of the things I saw in the industry that was an issue was that customers would go to a consultant, ask what they could do. The consultant would hand them something and say, "This is what you should do." They'd go out, find a contractor to install it who wasn't familiar with high efficiency irrigation. The installation wouldn't be done properly. The contractor wouldn't know what to do with it once it was done, so they'd hand it back to the community. And then the community had spent a lot of money with no real results to show for it. So what we do is we take the customer from the beginning through the end. We do the consulting, we do the upgrades, we monitor the system after the fact and do the repairs to the system so that we can ensure the integrity of the system going forward. And that way there's no finger pointing. We either save you money or we don't. There's no other party that you know we can make an excuse that they caused the problem.
Yeah,
So that's what we've tried to do.
So Ralph, are you doing this through a communication in writing? Do you go to the HOA board meetings? I mean, how do you do all this so they understand?
Each site has different requirements. The water report that we had up there for Crystal Gardens, which is out in Avondale, Arizona, we do a monthly meeting with them and present a report showing the previous month's water usage based on previous years, so that they can see how we're doing. And even in 2023, when we had that very difficult summer, we were pretty close to 2022.
Yeah.
And so it can be done. And that's the neat thing, is the science doesn't lie. High efficiency heads work, pressure regulation works, smart clocks work if they're done right. And there can be phenomenal savings that you can achieve.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you made too. And we're really talking about being efficient with our systems. That is going to cause savings, but the efficiency is the key.
Exactly. And part of that efficiency is having a map so that you know what you're actually watering.
Yeah.
You can't program a smart clock if you're not really sure what it's watering or where. And so, and also doing repairs, maps are invaluable, because you can never ensure that the same tech is going to be assigned to the property. As much as you'd like that to be the case, it just doesn't always work. And so if you have a good map, that can save hours of troubleshooting, of someone just wandering around trying to figure out what's going on, and allows you to properly program the controller so that you can squeeze those extra gallons out of savings out of the clock.
Right. Right. Well, we have a slew of questions coming in now. And so I'm going to ask a few of these. One viewer is wondering about dealing with water districts that are requiring drip irrigation throughout the renovation project. Is that a challenge? How do you approach that? Is it even a requirement in Arizona?
In the Phoenix market, everyone has drip. Everything since like the 90s has been drip irrigation. Yeah. Some of the older properties still have bubblers and things of that nature, but we are very familiar with drip irrigation and very comfortable with it, and it works very well.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. And then how do you monitor and evaluate an irrigation system before you come on the irrigation scheduling if it's not a smart controller?
Well, auditing can be part of that. Trying to figure out how efficient is your system. Catch can tests can be part of that. A lot of times, just because I do this so much, you can visually see how efficient a system is just by running the heads and seeing what condition the system is in. Do you have a whole bunch of broken heads? Do you have rotors that aren't turning? Do you have mismatched rotors with spray heads, nozzles that aren't the right size? All of that contributes to the efficiency or inefficiency of the system. So just walking and noting all of the issues is a good idea to get a feel for how efficient or inefficient the system is. Catch cans, if you want to dial in, that's the best way, but it's a little bit more expensive way of doing it. Usually you just need to know that the system is not the most efficient. You don't need to know that it's 43% efficient, so to speak.
Yeah, so a big part of water management and efficiency in irrigation is the soil, right? Certain soils can take on more water, hold on to more water, right? Your soil's a big deal.
Right.
30 years of experience in the industry. do you feel just the hand squeeze test on soil is okay, or do you send soils in for testing and look at those results?
Generally speaking, the hand squeeze test is generally acceptable.
Yeah.
Again, it just depends how tight you want to get with your numbers. Most properties, they want to save as much as they can, but they have a budget.
Yeah.
And so at least a good way to start is just, check, that hand squeeze, as you say, just feeling the dirt. Do you have clay? Do you have sand? Do you have loam? Usually those are pretty much what the smart controllers, the inputs that they're asking for. You can send it in and get an exact and dial in a little bit more. But it would depend on your budget.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
how much you want to save.
Yeah. Okay, great. Then the other thing that we have a question about is, does proper water management also reduce the amount of time somebody should be spending on the maintenance of their property?
Well, at the get-go, no. When you're starting out, especially when you add flow sensing to a system, you find all kinds of problems that you didn't realize you had. We had an experience at an HOA where we added a flow sensor and then found this drip zone that was using like 30 gallons a minute, which was like way high for a drip system, because drip systems are usually gallons per hour. And so after messing around for a couple hours, we finally figured out that a homeowner had tied their entire sprinkler system into the HOA water. And that's where all the water was going, was to this resident's home, which we would have never found without a flow sensor.
Right.
But usually there's a lot of maintenance to get the system up to par. And then it should be just regular routine maintenance. A mower breaks a head here and there, a kid kicks a head over. So it should, definitely reduce your costs long term.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. That's yeah, and I like there's a kind of a before and after to it. It's not the fact that you do it doesn't mean instant savings. You have to respond to what you're learning. I like that. So Ralph, I know business is great for you right now. Are you taking on any new customers these days?
Oh yeah, with always room to grow.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to ask you some more questions about this, or maybe get a quote for water management on their property, what should they do?
Send me an email, Ralph at Irrigation, or give me a phone call. I think my phone number is going to pop up here at some point.
There it is.
That is actually my cell number, so that will that will definitely get you to me. And I would be happy to. I think the first step is just talking. I think you can sort a lot of, Pat Sajak's had it right all these years. Just talk it out. If you can just talk with someone to find out what your options are, even if you don't decide to go with us, I think you're going to have more knowledge than you had when you started the conversation. You'll have some ideas to bring to the board as far as other options that they may not have even known existed. Especially in properties that have a lot of turf, where you might be thinking about turf removal, but turf removal can be very expensive versus just upgrading your system, which generally speaking is much less expensive. So if, back to that water use report, if we can get you to that number that you should be using, would that be enough?
Yeah.
But yeah, please reach out. Any questions you have, email or phone call, I'd be happy to talk with you. Even if you're out of state, we definitely, talking is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, well, and that's a generous offer too, especially with the out-of-state people. I think that's just great. Thank you. And I think they can easily tell just from our webinar today, even if they hadn't met you before, you know a lot about this irrigation and water management, and I'm sure they'll benefit from it. So thank you, Ralph. Mike, anything you want to add here for a conclusion or?
Yeah, just a couple of things here. When we say smart controllers, when we put that on there, a lot of contractors, I see a lot of promotions on LinkedIn, on other different type of social media. that's kind of what they do, and that's kind of where it stops. I think what Ralph does, it takes it to another level when he's meeting with his clients on a monthly basis, going over water bills and stuff like that. So there's a little kind of on steroids water management as well, which I think we need to get to as a society more for our contractors, our HOAs, and be able to really dive in and see how much water we're really using and really monitor that. So even though we have smart controllers on the site, does not mean that it's exactly water management is the end all. I think we need to do a little bit more so we can help conserve and save water and ultimately save money for the client.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great points, right?
I think I have seen that the properties that I go out to that have smart controllers, I would say probably 70% of them are operating in basic mode. They're not operating in smart mode. So that's a great point, Mike.
Yeah, that's well, that's a necessary number to know. And boy, we got to do everything we can to change that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Ralph, you've been just great today. I've learned a ton in this short period of time. So I want to thank you for coming on today and sharing your knowledge and information with our viewers. Really appreciate that. And Daniel, great job on the presentation and the slides. Certainly appreciate that. And then, of course, Mike, you always do a great job on these. So thanks for joining us as well.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, so next week we're going to be back with Corey Broad from Avid Water. He's going to be talking about for our large growers in agriculture, what they can do to make sure that they run their systems the most efficient manner to save the most amount of money for the season coming up. So it should be a good one. Ralph, Mike, and Daniel, thank you again. I want to say thank you to all our viewers. You can see our over 300 webinars that are all free to watch at janesusa.com/trainings. As you know, too, we extract all the audio out of these and create a podcast as well. And you can listen to those wherever you find your favorite podcasts. We're there. And I'll tell you what, it gets me excited when I think people are out working and listening to podcasts, not just our podcasts, but other general podcasts, and educating themselves while they work. I think that's just great. So anyway, thanks a lot, everybody. We'll be back here next week. Good to see everybody. See you guys. Thanks.